is he made them have one. All sin has the same consequence, which is death. And then at the time, he kills like a sheep, which is kind of like the first sacrifice, to physically cover them. But then he sets up the picture for Jesus to come and for once and for all, cover all sin all at the same time, because all sin has the same what's the word? Yeah, consequence. Yeah, outcome. Like it all requires the exact same act to counteract the sin, so that we can continue living in perfect love with God and Him still be just at the same time. Which is why we need Jesus, which is why we need God, which is why God is all loving and all just. Because all sin is all at the same playing field. And requires one action to cover it and make it okay. Because God didn't force us to love Him in return. I don't know if that answers.
Yeah. I think that's a really
That
good.
was the longest and.
I told you.
Well done, Natalie. That was very, very well done. Thank you. And bon appetit. Thank you.
Okay.
Nice. Who's that guy?
That's my surname.
Yeah, it's so cool. The best of it is sisterhood.
I was like, this is
What the heck is going on here?
I hope it's okay.
This is the first of the year.
Oh, we just sat together.
One of the first days when I was gonna sit next to Julie, I think, and I sat like 2
I didn't
chairs
know that was
over.
a song. Yeah,
I was leaving room for Gemma.
Oh,
I love
Yeah.
this song. I
that was
really
in
love
this.
Yeah, Gemma was like, it's okay, you can sit next to her.
We need to listen to it.
We'll listen to that. Did you know it says, wait, where did you born in February? I was born in February. Are you born in February?
Oh.
It's like from
Now, all of you are supposed to be salivating now, right?
Yes.
Hello there.
Good morning, John.
Good morning. Yeah.
How are you?
I'm fine.
Good, good. I suppose you didn't get my joke about salivating. About like dogs, when you bring the bed and salivate.
Pretty good.
Anyway, you gotta do what you gotta do. What you gotta learn. Good. Well, let's jump right in. And I want to. We're almost to the point, and I was talking to Jonathan, and he said, "Yeah, I'm enjoying the big picture, but I'm anxious to get down to okay, how do we do this stuff? What's it look like?" So we're almost there. So just a couple of comments before we jump in this morning. Yesterday we finished up with our buddy Stephen Fry. By the way, Stephen Fry's a really good guy. I listen a lot to the atheists, especially the radical atheists. And I mentioned there the other day. So there's Sam Harris is really, really bright. I mean, this guy's off the charts smart and very articulate. And some of the atheists have a really, really nasty attitude and a hardcore too. Sam doesn't. But like Christopher Hitchens, the guy had a real attitude. I mean, he was pompous and arrogant, and he wasn't. I didn't appreciate his. He was smart, but he didn't come across well. Same with Richard Dawkins. Dawkins has kind of an attitude of superiority and looking down on you poor peasants that believe in this, non-material being. How stupid could you possibly be? But Sam Harris, but Stephen Fry, I've watched him quite a bit, and there was, not too long ago, Dr. Peterson, Jordan Peterson, that we saw yesterday. Dr. Peterson and Stephen Fry sat down for well, it wasn't really a debate. It was listed as a debate, but these two guys, these two gentlemen, sat down and carried on about an hour or more of a dialogue, a conversation of real gentility. They were kind to one another, they were listening to one another, and I always brought tears to my eyes. I thought that was one of the most beautiful exchanges of ideas. They didn't agree on a lot of stuff that I've seen in a very, very long time. And so it was refreshing to see two guys who, opposing views, have a rational, non-emotional conversation back and forth. It was magnificent. And then later on, as fate would have it, I forget, it was some kind of forum, and it ended up that Peterson and Stephen Fry were on one side of the issue, and there was other guys arguing, and so they were arguing together at one, because there was a point they agreed on. They were arguing together about this other issue, and it was quite remarkable. So just because somebody, and somebody, I don't know if it was Matt, whoever yesterday touched on, we were talking about Stephen Fry. This is just my experience, so take it for what it's worth. But the atheists that I have encountered, I can't think of an exception. There may be an exception, but I think all of the atheists that I've encountered personally, every one of them, it wasn't a matter of pure intellectual approach. It wasn't just a matter of just intellectually coming to this conclusion. Every one of them, almost without exception, was angry at God. They've been hurt by the church. They've been disappointed by God. Was that you, Becca, that mentioned that?
I didn't think we said it out loud, but Joshua and I had a conversation about that.
Okay, yeah, but it's amazing. These guys, what happens is, usually there's some kind of trauma. They pray to God and say, "Oh God, help me," and nothing happens. Or the person dies, nothing happens, and so they get angry at God. And then, of course, if they're angry at God, then they come up with all kinds of excuses of why they hate Him or why He doesn't exist, and blah blah blah. So, when you encounter atheists, my advice is be kind. Okay? Be kind. They're hurt mostly. They're really hurting, and you're not going to win. Trust me, winning intellectual arguments is never a good approach to trying to persuade somebody towards the gospel. I've never met anybody that's in the kingdom now because they lost an intellectual argument, right? The old saying goes, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah. Oh, amazing.
They don't care how much you know, but they really consider that. Remember Ken, the guy on our team to Afghanistan? Lynn and I thought we had all they had. We were ready to go after him, and nobody liked us. But the hippies loved Ken because he cared for them. He loved on them. He took care of them when they were sick. He was there for them. So, note to self. Nobody's ever been, I don't know if he's somebody, but as far as I know, it's not a good strategy, let's put it that way, to try to win an intellectual argument just so you can get a feather in your cap or another scalp on your spiritual belt of converts. So, anyway, the other point I want to make real quick is we talked, when we talk about the things that Stephen Fry brought up, if God created all these things, actually it wasn't it wasn't an insect, it was a parasite that burrows into the eyes of children. It's called a guinea worm, I think. And all these horrible things that happen, and God created them, and so God must be a horrible, terrible being, brutal and nasty beyond comprehension. Well, the problem with that is, in my opinion, in Christianity, we have to a large degree ending up worshiping the wrong God. It's not the God that we see portrayed in the Old Testament. It's not the Judaic God as such. What happened is, we've got the Greek God. And unfortunately, nobody seems to have noticed. So here's what happened. During the time of the initial time of Christ, right, what was the greatest sort of cultural influence in the world, in the known world at that time? It was Greek philosophy. It was Hellenism. They had ruled the world. Alexander the Great started it about 300 BC. And that whole idea of Hellenism, it's called Hellenism, but it's really Greek culture, Greek philosophy, the influence of that. So the whole world, the known world spoke Greek, right? That was the main language. And the Greek philosophers we talked about yesterday were powerful. These guys were good. They had so much that was absolutely spot on. What happened was, when the church first started out, remember, it was mostly Jews, right? It was people that were Jews telling Jews. And then all of a sudden, you had this influx of the heathen, the Greeks and the other, and they started coming in. So by the time of about 100 AD, say 60 or 70 years from the time the church started, the church was now 90% Greek and 10% were Jews. I mean, it just swept through the whole Greek culture. And if you don't understand what's called Gnosticism, you would not understand probably 80% of what Paul was writing about. Because Paul was writing against the Gnostics. What were the Gnostics? The Gnostics were the Greeks that were coming into Christianity, but bringing their Greek philosophy with them. Okay? So part of the Greek philosophy was that God, hated the material world. The material world was evil. So God couldn't have anything to do with evil, so he couldn't have anything to do with the material world. So there was a whole movement in the church, in the early church, called Docetism, which means to seem like. So they said, well, Jesus might have been God, but he wasn't really human, because he couldn't be human, because he couldn't touch anything material. So he was like a ghost, and he wasn't real. He was just, and that's why I said, Paul writes, and many of the gospels, Jesus came in the flesh, right? He's talking about Jesus was a real person. Jesus was a material being. Well, that's what Paul was writing against. He was writing against Gnosticism. And so, unfortunately, Greek philosophy and Greek culture is so powerful that it basically took over the church. And it was primarily one guy who introduced it, and that was Augustine.